evening, everyone. I'd like to welcome everybody to our Special Education Advisory Committee meeting of Thursday, October 19th, 2023. Begin by reciting the land acknowledgement. The Durham District School Board acknowledges that many Indigenous nations have long-standing relationships, both historic and modern, with the territories upon which our school board and schools are located. Today, this area is home to many Indigenous peoples from across Turtle Island. We acknowledge the Durham region forms a part of the traditional and treaty territory of the Mississaugas of Spooner Island First Nation, Mississauga peoples, and the treaty territory of the Chippewas of Georgina Island First Nation. It is on these ancestral and treaty lands that we teach, learn, and live. We'll move on to the Indigenous Rights and Human Rights Statement. Durham District School Board recognizes Indigenous rights are distinct. In the exercise of those rights, Indigenous staff and students shall not be subject to actions with the aim or effect of depriving these distinct rights. The Durham District School Board is committed to learning and working environments that center human rights and equity and are safe, welcoming, respectful, equitable, accessible, inclusive, and free from discrimination. Okay, and we will move on to our roll call. We started with regrets. We have regrets from Rowan for the Learning Disabilities Association, Rowan Jarvis. And at this time, I'd like to let everybody know that we received an email just yesterday from Kathy Keaty for Voice for Deaf and Hard of Hearing, letting us know that she's stepping down from SEAC, and unfortunately they don't have anybody to step in. So we have a card going around if you guys would all like to sign it. Just let Kathy know how much we've appreciated her voice over the years and how much closure to her. And yeah, since we won't have an opportunity to thank her in person. Okay. Okay, so we'll begin with roll call. Tarkali, Durham Civil Association, and Lester. Elizabeth Daniel, member at large.
Main Brown, representative from Ontario Parents Visually Impaired Children.
Rima Santi, Vice Principal on Ajax. General Field Trustee of Washington.
Sense Renee Burrell, Autism Ontario.
Morgan Cameron, member at large.
Lisa Ray, Vice Principal in Oshawa.
Michelle Crawford, Assistant Lead Inclusive Student Services.
Connor Jacobson, Assistant Lead Inclusive Student Services.
Lisa Rye, Recording Secretary. Andrea McCauley, Superintendent of Inclusive Student Services.
Eva Kyriakis, Association for Bright Children and SEAC Chair. I'd also like at this time to welcome our guests online and also to welcome our other guests online today. Chris Connolly and Leslie Parsons will be talking about our parent survey that was done last year, and also Lisa Coppins, who will be discussing our accessibility policy. Oh, and Katie's here from Maximum City to also listen as well. Okay, so welcome everybody. We will move on then to our approval of the agenda. Does anybody have any questions or concerns with respect to the agenda as it stands? Okay, can we get a motion to approve the agenda since we're now? Seconders? Tara Colley, all in favor? The motion passed. Okay, moving on to the approvals for the minutes from June 2022, or June 22nd, 2023, sorry, of last June. I do have one correction to note in the minutes. It refers to, in the roll call, Hannah Nguyen from Easterfield, she was not here. On the very front page.
Yeah.
Minutes.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
I have it listed under regrets.
under regrets. Yeah, she wasn't. Yeah, she didn't think it was on grades.
Oh, she did, okay. I thought it was coming to the last meeting.
She didn't.
Because
Oh, that's right. Yeah. Okay. Sorry. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. No worries. Anybody else have any questions or concerns with respect to the minutes from June? We get a motion then to pass the minutes. Tara, any seconders? Morgan, all in favor? Okay, motion passed. All right, then we will move on to our staff reports, beginning with the administration report.
Thank you so much. So we have just a few quick updates between the three of us. The first one is just to thank our schools because we weren't able to do so in September. For really positive startup, our schools are experiencing quite an enrollment growth, which has been a topic of conversation both in terms of supporting our school leaders, supporting families, as well as around the board table. So there is some information posted on the board website for families looking for information around how students are being accommodated, some pressure areas for us, as well as our trustee advocacy for new build schools with the ministry. So we will circulate that link. In general, our planning team is very accurate in terms of enrollment projections. And we did see both the projected growth plus a little bit slightly higher. And so as a district, we sit around 79 or 80,000 at this point. So what we'll do is we'll compile our enrollment. We will share it out with you. October 31st is a reporting date for us to the ministry around enrollment. And so what I'd like to do is be on the after side of our official enrollment reporting to the ministry to bring you numbers in terms of both the overall enrollment as well as the number of students accessing through individual education plans as well. So that is part of the October 31st report as well. We will say as well that now that we are past the 30th day of learning on the regular calendar, thank you out to our school teams and families for all of the conversation and collaboration over the past few weeks, stretching back into August for our modified schools that led to the design and now the implementation of all of the individual education plans that are active across the system. They did go out this week using the new software, which is PowerSchool integrated. So an adjustment anytime there's a software change in the district, that's a bit of a learning curve. And so we just really thank classroom staff, administrators, and then special education resource teachers and our inclusive technology team and IT teams for rolling that out through the district. My last one is just a quick note that PPM 169, so policy procedure memorandum is our directives from the ministry. PPM 169 is a directive around student mental health and includes 11 specific action items. Our mental health team and Positive School Climate team have taken PPM 169 and the 11 action items and done a comparative to our current mental health and wellbeing action plan. They are very much aligned, and we will be bringing a report in advance of the implementation date. So again, it needs to be in place by January 1st. We are coming to our trustees at November standing with a report on how our plan aligns with the 11 action items. We'll take it to our trustees. And then next month in the SEAC package, we will provide a link to the report shared publicly, as well as the video link to the presentation that will accompany that information report. So we'll take it to trustees at November standing and then bring it around this table. Always happy for feedback in either of those spaces. We consider a mental health and wellbeing action plan similar to an individual education plan as a working plan that is always in growth and change. And so we welcome feedback at that time as well. And then I'll turn it to Michelle and Connor, who will have an update for you as well.
Hi, everyone. As a board, we are committed to dismantling ableism, and as such, we are engaging in consideration around a name change to two of our service groups. One is Hearing Resource, a name change to the Teachers of the Deaf and Hard of Hearing, and Vision Resource, the Teachers of the Blind and Low Vision. Please reach out if you have any suggestions or concerns. We have spoken to a variety of teachers in regards to the name change, and we wanted to align with positive language, and as I said, to dismantle ableism, particularly with the names that were there before in terms of Hearing Resource and Vision Resource.
And as a district, as we move towards action and impact, and really look at how that action is impacting our students, our families, our staff, and how we're moving students along, we've shifted a little bit. So you'll notice in your package for tonight, as well as in September as well, you had an impact update. So in September, we were able to bring you a quick update around specialized equipment. So I would want to bring a couple of highlights around just the number that was actually put out in terms of some of that annual reporting that we do, as well as some of the technology and sort of wide variety of technology that was purchased to be able to facilitate that essential learning for our students. The other one for this month as well, we want to highlight our classroom support staff. As we know, we do have our wonderful classroom support staff who are fulfill a variety of jobs and a variety of roles, including our ASL interpreters, our educational assistants, interveners, and language acquisition support workers as well. What I really want to highlight for you are the quotes. These are quotes from students and from educators and from people across the system, trying to really highlight what the impact that our classroom support staff have on them, as well as on the students themselves as well. So also highlighting that November 15th is our classroom support staff appreciation day. So there will be communication going out to schools, and with them we'll be making sure that those valuable employees are definitely noticed and are recognized on that particular day as well. But please do read the quotes. They hit the heart because that's from the students and from the educators.
Do we have any questions for Min with respect to the Min report? Okay, then we move on to the board report.
It's actually hard to believe it's almost been a year since this board was formed. So coming up on November 20th will be the organizational board meeting. So following that, there will be some changes. May not be trustee Miller and myself here, but it will be trustees. Back in June, the board created a DDSB Violence in Schools ad hoc committee, and the first meeting was September 11th, and they've adopted in terms of reference. And this past Monday, on the 16th, the board reviewed another report from the Integrity Commissioner regarding Trustee Stone, and the board has placed further sanctions, which include being barred from all committees until December 31st, 2024. And then the last thing I have is regarding the OPSPA Advocacy Day. That's coming up November 27th. It is after the organizational meeting, so it may not be myself and Trustee Cunningham, my the other trustees, but if there's something that you want to have trustees take to have conversations with MPPs on that day, then putting something together, either putting something together separately, or I think it was asked of staff also if there's something that they want to put together for trustees to take to have those conversations, so it could be included in that, or it could be a separate thing. But we're happy to do that.
Do we have any questions with respect to the board report? Trustee Oldfield, would you prefer like the SEAC to combine something, or individual associations send you something?
I think having one thing, in speaking with politicians, typically, there's a certain amount of time, it's a limited amount of time, and we want to be able to leave them something that's clear and concise. So if there are a number of different documents, that might be problematic. So it could be that you can combine it. So if the associations want to send something and you were to put it together in one document, I think you could have different points, but it's one piece that gets left behind.
Okay. Alright. So if anybody wants to send anything, or you don't have some suggestions right now that you want, we can put together something and send for them to take with them. That would be great. I think funding is always something that we bring up.
Yeah, I think we did bring something last year. We did,
Yeah, given the shortfalls that we're seeing, especially with being such a growing board. Are sort of mounting there, so. So please feel free to send me an email, put it together. I can send it out to the group again, sort of combined, and maybe have Freddie and I take a look at it. Where do you need it by?
Well, the date is the 27th, so
October.
the 27th of November.
Right.
So it would be, I don't know what day of the week that is, but earlier that week, so a few days before that anyway.
Okay, let's try to, yeah, we'll go for a week ahead, yeah. Yeah, if you guys could do that.
Monday. What if SEAC, sorry, through you? What if SEAC combined by the Friday the 17th, so that it was coming in and being shared with you, and then depending on what happens on Monday night for organization, then we can make linkage, either you have the information or,
Yeah, that makes sense.
is that all right?
Yeah, the 17th.
I think on the 17th, it's clear who it goes to.
Yes.
Okay.
All right, November 17th. Okay. All right, there's no further questions with respect to the board report? Okay, so we'll move on then to the presentation with respect to the SEAC parent and guardian survey results with Chris Conley and Leslie Parsons.
Thank you very much for the opportunity to join you this evening. I'm pleased to introduce one of our researchers, Leslie Parsons, who's been the one that drafted, coordinated, and summarized your data. And so I'm happy to have her with us to share your results. Leslie.
Leslie, just before you get started, SEAC has in front of you a place, what we refer to in education as a placemat. So it is a ledger-sized sheet. And so as Leslie speaks, and then Michelle and Connor will help culminate it and take you through a series of conversations after. As Leslie shares the result, what we're hoping that you'll do individually is just track based on the headers, such as feedback from families that might guide potential actions by SEAC, some comments that are just wonders that you may have, and then anything that doesn't fall into one of those two categories that you want to keep track of for a conversation to drop at the bottom. But remembering that the outcome of the SEAC survey is the intention of SEAC to create its action plan for this school year in terms of 2 to 3 key things that we will achieve as a group together. So Leslie will share the results because I think that's really strong family voice in terms of what they're naming and noticing as strengths or areas that we can improve on. And then as SEAC consultative to the district on that and how that community to parent voice is really important. But we just thought it had kind of a template to use. If you don't want to write right on it because we've left a watermark on it and you prefer Post-it notes, can you just quietly raise your hand, and as Leslie starts, I'll slip around and drop Post-it notes in front of you if you'd rather. Some people like writing on papers, some people don't. So just let me know if you prefer Post-its. And other than that, Leslie, sorry to interrupt you. And
okay, well, thank you very much for having us. I hope you can hear me all right. And so if we could have the first slide, I just wanted to say, on behalf of our department, we're really excited and pleased to be able to support the SEAC effort. And a thank you to all the families that participated. They were very generous with their time, and the comments were very honest and heartfelt, and so provided a wonderful wealth of data. So the survey was conducted in June of 2003, and we had just over 1,100 families participate. All of the grades were represented, and all of the major municipalities, with Oshawa and Whitby having the highest participation. The survey was focused mostly on communication received from the support team members, but it also had a section to provide feedback on the IPRC review experience, as well as some information on the student information. That was their class placements and things. So the next slide, please. So as you can see, there was, overall a high rate of satisfaction, and that was sort of represented throughout all the grade groupings. We didn't ask individual grades; we grouped them with with a slight decrease in satisfaction towards the higher grades, which is not was not surprising. We have the next slide. So how I conducted the information that we provided to you was the comments, and this was done through thematic analysis, which is taking like-minded comments and grouping them together under themes. And there was quite a wide span of things that people touched upon, and we redacted any names of individuals and schools to be fair. I mean, rather not to identify. The names that were removed were actually positive, but as a practice in our department, we don't feel it's necessary to identify people by name. So we have the next slide. So in one of the questions we asked what was working well, and there was lots of comments. There was thousands, almost 2,000 comments, but some parents and caregivers provided just a 1 or 2 word answer. So instead of doing a thematic analysis, I took those words and created a word cloud. So a word is represented, the larger the word, the more frequent it was mentioned. So there was a lot of positive things that were shared, supportive and helpful, amazing, understanding, caring, kind, empathy. I mean, there was reflected the satisfaction that people indicated they had with the communication. So that's really affirming to the support teams. If we could have the next slide. So we asked what were things that we could improve in terms of the communication they were receiving. And again, people offered 1 or 2 short word answers. And these were the things that people felt were lacking or absent and they wanted to see in the communication. And one of the largest responses was positive. If there was communication happening, frequently it was, they only heard, from the school or the school team members if something negative was happening. So there was a desire to want to hear about the successes and the positive things that were going on. And if we have the next slide. This is the 2 word clouds compared together. And as you see, what's working well, this is what people are saying is happening, and they're very appreciative of that aspect of the communication. And on the right is what needs to improve. And it's many of the same things. So some families are experiencing a gap in or a limit to the communication. And it's really seems to be based a lot around that interpersonal relationship and connecting and bonding with the team members. So I thought that was very interesting. And if we could have the next slide. So for me, the key findings were that for most part, the respondents were satisfied or very satisfied with what they were receiving in terms of the communication. There was an interesting that 16%, which represented 185 participants, indicated they weren't familiar with the reference guide that is provided. And that may go some way to explaining some of the comments were about seeking information. And I wondered if perhaps some of that information was available in the reference guide, but because they weren't aware of it, some of the information would be easily attainable for them if they were able to access the guide. The top 3 things working well: the emails, the outreach and updates. And I classified outreach and updates as a sort of informal communication, as opposed to scheduled meetings or reports or report cards. But the daily interactions that families have, and the apps and the tools were working really well. Reminder, I think, was one of the apps that was mentioned the most. The top 3 things that needed improvement in terms of communication was, again, those progress updates and outreach. And it didn't have to be elaborate reports. It was just having a connection on and a daily, or weekly, or even monthly check-in with a member of the team or the educators to just to know how things were going. And again, that connecting with the team, I think, would help to create a relationship. Some parents were not really familiar with their team and weren't able to connect with them. And the other thing was about the individual education plan. There was some comments around not sure that everyone was aware of the contents and the around the implementation, and was everything that's in the plan being implemented or adhered to. So that's pretty much all we had compiled for you. There's more information available, but it has to do with the review meeting, and so that can be made available if you wish. But if we felt that this was what your focus was on, that was my understanding. So this is what we had put together for you. And if there's any questions that you had for Chris or I.
Does anybody have any questions with respect to the information that's here? I do. I'm just curious as to how this works out. I know that like the group that had the lowest participation rate in the survey was grade 11, 12. But they were also the highest group in the very dissatisfied range. And I'm wondering how that extrapolates out, right? Like, less people responded, but that number went up. And, and as well as the sort of the somewhat dissatisfied category, like when we're looking at it, you've almost got people who are somewhat dissatisfied and very satisfied, or similar kind of number to the ones that are very satisfied. Kind of equal on either end of that scale, right? Like I'm just wondering how that extrapolates out.
My sense was through the comments that in the higher grades, the communication appears to shift towards communicating directly with the student. And then the expectation is the student communicates the information home. This survey was done for to the parents and the caregivers. So it's the parent and caregiver level of satisfaction. So I can't answer as to whether or not, how the students are, but if that's what's taking place and the communication is being directed to the student with the expectation that they will then communicate to their parent or caregiver, there's a decrease in satisfaction based on the fact that parents of grade 11 and 12 students aren't in as much direct communication with the support team. that was through the comments that seemed to indicate what was happening.
You're thinking the number might be skewed because if fewer people are responding, then you're more likely to get the ones who are dissatisfied.
Well, that's, well, I mean, yeah, I mean, if you're getting a smaller, you're gonna get more people, because, I mean, people who are dissatisfied tend to be the ones who are more likely to respond in the first place. But I find it interesting, yeah, that you pointed out, yeah, this was geared towards parents and, you know, remembering that kids in grade 11 and 12, for the most part, are still considered minors, right? So I'm wondering why there's more leaning in grade 11, 12 to the communication only being directed to the student as opposed to parents, because I don't know about anybody around this table, my kids were in high school, that's when I got the least amount of information from my kid, right? Because they're not gonna share with you, especially if it's not positive, they're not gonna wanna come and tell mom or dad, right? So that's the thing I think that we need to sort of look at what's going on there, because those years are kind of, especially those 2 years, are actually kind of really important for these kids for future pathways, right? So.
I suspect there's people thinking about self-advocacy and empowerment as well.
That there is
Trooping the kids in that way.
But I mean, the kids should definitely be involved in all of that, right?
But not
But
to the exclusion.
not to the exclusion of the parents, because, you know, we've all been that age, and we've all, you know, many of us have had kids that age, yeah, go ahead. Karen.
Just on that whole theme of just as a potential idea, saying, what if we gave the survey to some of the kids as well, because their opinion of how things are going may be different than the parents' opinion as well, especially in that grade. So,
Yeah.
just wondering if that might provide an interesting perspective.
Yeah, we start looking at the high school kids in particular, not just
Delivered to
giving it to the
students
parents, but also giving it to
as well.
yeah.
Yeah, and then I'm gonna give 2 secondary-based experience administrators in the room as well. I think, one of the things that, positions for us as an inclusive student services team is in our work and our goals for this year, is a focus on our 18 to 21-year-old population. And we know sometimes the, students that are able to access to 21 and that we have the privilege of supporting in, those age bands, traditional worded surveys don't work. To get that information. So we're coming alongside the team that Michelle leads in terms of our transition coordinators, the facilitators that Connor leads, to be able to have some of those conversations around, is it working for you? What do you need from us differently? So that's part of our work for this year, is that upper age band and secondary. But to your point about what is kind of typical in terms of communication at a senior grade level, Michelle's an experienced secondary principal and Lisa's in the secondary school leading every day right now, so I didn't know if either of them wanted to comment on practices at secondary.
So through you, Chair. So I'm a new vice principal, but as the head of special education a couple of years ago. I know that it certainly is a focus within our secondary school buildings to always increase the independence of our students as they move through grade 9 to 12. But it is critical that the parents are part of that conversation as well. So I know when it comes to communication around IPRC meetings, et cetera, those formal conversations, they always are in conjunction whenever possible with family and student as we prepare them for those post-secondary pathways. Certainly those conversations that go on impromptu, whenever we can involve in the parent and the student as a capacity building opportunity with the kid, we certainly do that. I understand what Leslie is saying for sure, out of those comments and how she would see those trends, that we do have those conversations with the kids and perhaps sometimes that messaging doesn't get through. But when it comes to those really important conversations and setting up times and meetings and case conferences, parents are absolutely, they have to be involved because they're under the age of 18, and then special circumstances as well beyond that. But certainly as a former head of special education, whenever the opportunity is there, even in those quick conversations, getting a parent on the phone is very, very important for sure. But I do understand what you're saying as well.
So through you, Chair, we're really concentrating this year on transitions. So for example, we have 2 transition coordinators that work with us, and we have been out to schools and met with school teams that have now, we've seen a gradual increase in uptake, not only working with students one-on-one, but also working within classrooms to encourage those transition conversations. And for us to come in earlier instead of at the end in grade 12, when oftentimes we will get the conversation from a parent around, well, we're not sure what the next step is. So we really want to back that up as much as possible, but also working with the students in grade 11 and grade 12 on independence and what their future goals may be, whether we're college, university, apprenticeship, et cetera. So actively for the month of September, we've been around to secondary schools meeting with the teams, and both of my coordinators have indicated that they are starting to get very busy, which is a really good indication that they're in the schools and working alongside the kids.
Thank you. Any other questions?
I have an observation.
Yeah.
Looking at, comparing the 2 word clouds and seeing the connections between them, and then looking at the more detailed pieces on page 3. It seems that the parts that are working well are kind of the operational pieces. I'm getting emails, I'm being informed of what's happening, I'm getting the IEPs, I'm being informed of what meetings are happening, etc. But then the parts that need improvement are, I want to be called into the conversation a little deeper. That's how the inferencing I'm kind of making from it. Being able to connect with the support team. So those would be the people that are actually in direct contact with their child or their children. And so it seems like that personal connection, and I noticed that empathy, though not the largest word on the word cloud, was still pretty prominent compared to some other words. That need for empathy and understanding of the parental experience of, I may not have all the answers and I don't know, and I may not understand the school system enough to be able to chime in there the way that I would like to, and I may not even understand all the complexities of my child depending on what the needs are, but I need to feel like I'm fully invested and being called into the conversations that are happening. So I also saw the word jargon and the improvement part, right? And the in-person, like, and so in-person doesn't necessarily mean the face-to-face, but then it's also the connection when you are face-to-face. And having been in probably hundreds of IEP or school team meetings over the years myself as a parent and as an educator, that is the challenging piece, is that personal piece. And so that's just an inference and the connection that I kind of made by looking at that is how do we move forward, and the other piece I'm also thinking is probably a culturally relevant and responsive piece to some of the responses here as well. How do we call in educators to, yes, do that professional work? Professionalism came up on the what you're doing really well part. How do we move that to that culturally responsive pieces as well, and thinking of culture in all its forms, not just in terms of race or ethnicity.
Those are excellent points. Yeah, Senator Nevis, you can jump in.
Yeah, very good points. 2 things that I wanted to come to mind is the IPRC page. When I add up the not at alls and the ones in the 2s, right? So those are people that are really dissatisfied. They're 12%, 13%, 18%, and 16.5%. In a hall of 185 people, those are significant numbers, which say that in our potential actions, we should be looking at how to fix some of those things that you just brought up within our IPRC. And again, that trends in the IEP. For me, the word that stuck out in the word all was consistency. And when I wrote it down, I said, it's not just consistency from me, the teacher, to you, the student, but also from class to class, school to school, program to program. The other thing that I wanted to bring up is on page 2, we have 11.5%, 8.6% in the kindergarten grade 1, 2, 3. This is where we set the trends. This is where we set the stage for how communication is going to work. And we have almost 20% of those parents reporting that they're very dissatisfied. And I wonder how that feeds into the older ages. Do the parents stop expecting the communication? Do they stop participating because they didn't get it in the beginning? I think that we need to give focus to those younger ages so that the expectation with our families is clear.
Those are all excellent points. I'd actually like to get a copy of the 2 word clouds, just to be able to actually to closer analyze, you know, sort of where the overlap is and the difference in sizes. Because one thing I did notice in the dissatisfied section on that as well is many things that we've always been hearing, right? Some of these words that have come up, right? Because you're right, the consistency and from grade to grade, right? Like for a lot of parents, we've heard many times, you know, it's like every grade you're starting from scratch again and trying to make sure all of the supports are being properly provided and stuff. And, you know, and ensuring that we're like, you know, really taking a close look at that, seeing the trends that, you know, that we've been bringing up around the table, just what we've been hearing out in the community all along, right? I think some of that is just confirmed in there. And so. Yeah, go ahead.
So, the only other thing, other than what we've already covered and looking at, is on page 5, just sort of looking at the overall, just in terms of the IPRC meeting itself. Looking at the top 2 figures, just sort of like in the completely in like 4s and 5 categories, how comfortable were you in participating, and then how receptive were you? They're hovering around 70-ish% between the 2 categories, but then if you go down to, well, how productive was the meeting and how satisfied were you with the outcome? Those drop down into the 60s. So yeah, we had a great conversation, but I still didn't get what I needed for my child. And that's sort of, one could interpret that way. So what, I would be very curious, and now I'm on extra questions, but you know, that's gonna be hard to, why? Like why the drop? Like if you felt you had a good, you were able to express your ideas and then the reception from the staff was there and the rest of the team was there, why didn't we reach an outcome that we were as satisfied with? Like that would be a very interesting thing I would want to poke at.
So that might connect with the communication. So maybe it's happening, but it's not being communicated in a way that parents can understand. So then when they get a survey, they don't know how to, respond to come up this way.
Yeah, so that's, I just thought that was a significant-ish drop, like about a 10% drop there for me. I thought that was probably statistically significant. I remember my math class.
Wondering through you, Chair, as well, just wondering, would we be able to do a bit of an activity around this, because to be able to get some of the voices that may come through from this as well, maybe I'm going educator in this sense, but I'm wondering, is it possible, could we do something where we're taking a look at what we were jotting down, even all the great points that we shared here, because I think as well as a group, it would be great to be able to come up with some of those 2 to 3 points, like really, because we need really condensed points on what we can land as a group and also as a committee as well. So I'm wondering, again, would you do us a liberty, Michelle and I be able to just kind of walk people through a bit of an activity around this, or?
Like, you wanna do that tonight?
Yeah.
Or? Yeah, I mean, how does the group go? Yeah, everybody good with that? Yeah.
While we're talking about it, it makes no sense.
And we want to make sure 2 or 3 kind of what we do as a result of what we heard.
Right.
I think there needs to be a timely response to those, Leslie and Chris will often remind us, when people have been generous with giving up their input, they're looking for what did you do as a result of that in building trust and accountability. So if we could have, get to, as Connor said, 2 or 3 things that this table takes on collectively, including the staff support, that would be really great.
So
So go ahead.
I was gonna say, so I'm wondering, because again, we're just, maybe this is an elementary educator as well, if we could work with a shoulder partner. So somebody either to the left or to the right of us, and then have a discussion on what we heard through this. What were those themes? What were those, if you were to take a look at what you heard, those thoughts, those potentials, those wonders, and then look at how do we turn this into 2 to 3 potential items that might do, and then we'll come back together as a group, and if shore departments, one person would like to be able to share that, and then come out and share those 2 to 3 particular action items that we could look at. And so it's interesting to hear, because hopefully, if we're looking at the numbers, we don't end up at 20 different action items, but it would be nice if we could end up just, usually this works out, where you usually get a common group of action items that come out from this.
So what I could do is I could summarize, I was writing down everything that you said, just general themes, and then maybe from those general themes, we could come up with some action items. Okay, so is that okay?
Yeah.
So general theme was really, first one, encourage positive connections with families. We heard a lot about interpersonal relationship with the team and the consistency of that really ran through. How to bring awareness to the IPRC process and the IEP development. And the next one was how do we encourage what's going on with grade 11 and grade 12, is it lack of participation, dissatisfaction, how do we encourage and make sure that encourage our grade 11s and grade 12s to reach out, talk about transitions. And the next one was, how do we encourage family participations for students in the younger grades? And the last one was, how do we gauge satisfaction? How do we gauge satisfaction for the meetings that have occurred? So those are kind of the four, maybe 5 areas that I was writing down. So if we could look at what from those themes are potential actions I would suggest.
If we go shoulder partners, and then we'll share what our potential action items are, and we'll share that back to the group. How much time do you think you want? It can be a time item, maybe 5 minutes, 7 minutes?
10 minutes max, because I think we've got a very full agenda.
Yes. So,
Yeah.
5?
But,
5, we got it.
okay, fine.
All right.
You might, I guess, Thank you, welcome back. We're gonna go around the table now and sort of discuss the items that we sort of all, that we thought were sort of really, we need to action. And then, and I will have a suggestion sort of after we go around the table and sort of how we can bring this forward in a stronger way for the system. So, you wanna?
No, you're speaking.
Okay, we talked about, I think, one of the things we figured was most important was the consistency piece, right? From class to class, grade to grade, teacher to teacher. There shouldn't be a reinventing the wheel each year, like the consistency piece is one area I think we really need to work on. Like we were talking about working on, as well as the IEP involvement. Where parents are feeling like their voice is really being heard with that, but in particular, we're concerned about the number of parents who are saying they have not seen a parent guide. And something to be given out, an IPRC is the initial one anyway. You know, we sort of said that, you know, if it was handy there at every IPRC meeting, every year, regardless, parents can say, oh, I already have that, or they can say, oh, I didn't get that, thank you, right? So there's a better chance of parents being aware of it if it's happening, if they're getting it each year, or if it's being offered each year. And, what was that last one? We were talking about?
Trust.
Oh, the trust, the trust aspect, yeah. So I think when you start working on your consistency and the parent, real meaningful parent involvement in the IEP planning, you're gonna build trust, right? That's gonna be part of it as well, so. Anyway, that's our two-cent work. And we'll pass it on over to you, Leslie.
We focused our conversation around the communication piece and how we communicate to parents. Are they actively involved in that communication and being able to understand the IEP, understand what's happening in IPRC, and you know who to contact if they're having questions, who is the point person, and maybe there's someone outside of the school, an advocate outside of the school that they can contact, so that if they're feeling kind of unsure and not confident to talk to the school about it, we can get their general questions answered about how to best operate within the system.
So we did talk about the guide and had the same idea that it should be handed out every year, no matter what, even though the student may be 5 years prior, but there's a concern that they're not getting a guide, that it should be easily available. And so at least every year, but I like the idea of every meeting. I think that's a good idea. I'm thinking of communication and looking at like when you looked at those word clouds, empathy, it was about the same size in each of those clouds. And then there was the issue of only getting negative feedback. And then I just sort of pulling on my own experience as a parent for a while since he was, you know, in high school. Communication on a regular basis, so whether it's worked into how the team is communicating with the parent. So, you know, hopefully if there's nothing that's negative, then that's just, that forces the team to say, well, this is what's happening that's good. Because it seems to get overlooked and it is disheartening and you're going to get people feeling unsatisfied when the only thing they hear is negative with other kids. So I think that's an important piece. How that's working, I don't know, but I think having like regular check-ins that are worked into the plan, I think is important.
I'll just add to that, just in terms of the communication, we said timely and maybe at the end of each in-person communication, because so like, you know, when you have those phone surveys where they're like, how did you feel? Like that way it's kind of relevant at that time. And asking parents, we said asking parents how they would like to be communicated with periodically. So even though they may have just wanted written or email, something may change throughout the year. And they just maybe prefer phone calls or different forms of.
So I'm just gonna pick up from all the stuff I've already said, so I'm not gonna repeat, except for that we had yet another parent who commented that the access to services has been different from school to school, grade to grade, and not quite clear and understood by the parent. One of the things that I wrote down here is that sometimes that training that comes in the informal sense, so at least once a year, you're going to the teams and doing informal things about reviewing the process for IEP, IPRCs, maybe doing scenarios or role plays, and also answering questions. So different from in-session training, but more of an application and the time for staff to be able to have open conversations with somebody in representation of inclusive student services about possible current things that are happening in their classrooms. But it, like, to start, it has to happen at least once a year, but hopefully it can happen more than that, because I'm like, who makes up these scenarios, who does the role plays, who goes in? So then my brain starts to think about implementation, and I'm like, well, never. In the wonders, I wrote down, inconsistent use of visuals was in the unsatisfied word. And I'm like, visuals are everywhere. And many schools I go to, I see them. So I wrote down, what are the standards? What is the consistency of schools? I know that sometimes we think we do a great job. We hear about visuals, we implement it, we're using them, but do we do the double back check-ins to make sure that they're accessible in every single school? And of course, the sharing of those visual resources, because nowadays you don't have to have the board maker license, right? You can just share those links with the parents. I wrote down a lot of like page 3, figure 5. That's the jumping off process, because it lists a nice list of things that families were having trouble with, like the progress updates, connecting with support teams, IEP awareness. But these are great points for administration to be reviewing, constantly reviewing the conversation to seeing where they can do any improvements. Who knows that? I represented you well.
So we talked with regards a little bit more in detail around the 11-12 piece and that juxtaposition between promoting independence in our students as they move out of high school and to post-secondary pathways, and how interesting it would be, a bit of a wonder if we had a subset of questions that ask for some collaboration between the parent and the student. Because as secondary educators, we're looking to prepare our students for, if we're thinking strictly about college and university pathways, for example, parents are not involved once they get there. So we want, as secondary educators, to ensure that we are empowering them with the skills as they leave our buildings to be able to go to their teachers and say, these are the accommodations that I need, these are the things that I need to be successful. So interesting, it would be interesting to sort of have a subset of questions where the parent and the student came together to see, are these things happening? Perhaps they weren't reflected in these pieces, but if we had that student voice in there as well, as the parent, because maybe they are happening, but that, as we talked about earlier, that messaging maybe isn't getting to the parent. And just, it would be interesting to see that piece. And one of the other wonders that I had was around the parent guide as well, whether it would be interesting to provide some type of standardized lettering that comes out, whether that's email or formal letters to introduce ourselves. Because I think really as a CERT in the school, they're very, very busy, very, very busy, which everyone around this table knows. So it'd be interesting to introduce themselves right off the hop at the beginning of the year, and in that, providing that parent guide to say, this is who I am, I'm really excited to work with your student this year. Here's a link or where you can find the parent guide. And it's something that's standardized for that consistency that the families are looking for, that they're receiving from their buildings, whether their student goes to school in Oshawa or Whitby or Pickering or the North, wherever it is. Here's everything that you need to know. I'm your CERT, looking forward to working with you and your student this year. So something like that. Is there anything more?
No, I think everyone else also covered a lot of other things.
Okay, so a suggestion is that has been made is to possibly SEAC to write a letter to the administration to be shared with the CERTs at training sessions on our survey. So we've done the work, we've got the data, we've done that, all that research. This is the things you're doing well. This is the things you need to look at, right? You have a real opportunity to make improvements on, and then, what are you gonna do with that information kind of thing, right? Be able to bring that directly to them, to say, we've done this, and these are the areas that parents are, and if that goes to your listing, that list right here of the things that parents are suggesting that need improvement on, right? If we have that here, to say to them, like, these are really key areas that need to be looked at, right? And try to bring that forward. And that way, yeah, go ahead.
Just, and this might be something that would happen anyway, but just in doing that, also hopefully asking, like, not only here's the information, what can you do with that, but asking them, what do you need from us to be able to do that? I mean, I don't wanna, because service are, wonderful, and I don't wanna do anything that would make people not want to be a CERT, and I know how busy they are. And so I think giving them information, making sure that it's presented in a way that is not seen as negative, but that here's the challenges and what can we do to support that.
Yeah, and I think that's always key, right? When we're writing letters, you always catch more flies with honey than you do with vinegar, and so you need to, these are key things we want to bring forward, but the writing of the letter for sure is key, and how it phrase it would, any letter would come to SEAC first for review and approval before it would be sent anyway, right? So it would come back to this table for comments and stuff, but I think it's an opportunity for us to, like, to sort of share our, the feedback that we have, because that's probably the best way for us to get results, right? Is to share that back within the system, to say, hey, this is what we're hearing. Yeah, go ahead.
And then have it come back, because I think getting that information back from the CERTs about what you need in support is helpful as a board to be able to understand, what does that mean then? Like, does that mean something in terms of resources? Does it mean something in terms of budget when the budget comes around, whatever? Yeah, like, what does that actually mean?
Maybe just give suggestions to a list of general suggestions, things that they can consider, so that you're giving them some things, food for thought, rather than just
Yeah, that's the point, not necessarily listening, but saying, and I think sort of focusing on the top ones, right? Like, you have 2.4% saying you need improvement on resources and stuff, but you've got, up here you've got progress, updates, feedback, outreach, that sort of thing, right? Or connecting with support teams, the consistency stuff is kind of at the higher end, right? And so focusing on the ones that really kind of, pick, you know what I mean? As opposed to just saying, look at all these things you need to improve, right? But you've got to start with, like, this is what parents are saying that is going well. And then saying, these are the things that parents are saying are not going so well. And
I give you some questions to think about based on.
Yeah, and how do we move, how do we, turn those suggest, sort of improvement areas into positive things the next survey. Yeah.
And then 3 as well, just on December, so throughout the year, we gather people, we were so happy to be able to get CERTs as well as principals and vice principals to come out to a learning community as well. So that might actually be a really neat opportunity. We do have one planned December 12th, where we have CERTs, principals, vice principals who come out. We take the whole day, we split up the system across the whole day. They come for a half day to learn with Michelle and I, and a whole bunch of other team members, and we tried to get as much into it, but it would be really neat to be able, and I don't know if that's an impossible task to land from that point, but we really need to be able to share that out during that time. And knowing that we have so many impactful people on this process as well. And we saw, I guess, if I'm going back onto Michelle's video from last year with Uxbridge, this was the inclusive baking, the skills competition. you could literally hear a pin drop in the voice that was shared across them. So I wonder, is it a letter, is it a video, is it a combination of both, bringing multiple voices to it? Because I think it's a really powerful message that is about to be shared, and I really wanted to like hit and then push into action for people as well. So it's just something to think about, because you have the venue, right? And we'll make space in that venue. It's our show, so to say. So we can give you space.
I just wanna know what the show was called.
We call it our Inclusive Student Services Learning Community.
Learning.
Community.
Okay, so since I'm still kind of new, not new, but just in terms of like from the onset or the initial stage of parents getting acquainted or involved with the whole process, I just want to know if they have like a welcoming package. Is that something that has ever existed or does exist?
So, yeah, typically, when we are going down that process and we are going to be going through the IPRC process and work with that committee to be able to look at placement and exceptionality, there are, part of that process is to be able to have the discussion with the team. And then also too, as we mentioned as well, like we should be either physically handing out or saying, what is your preferred method? Would you like the physical copy of the parent guide to IPRC, or would you like us to send you a link around that? And then also make yourself available, having that question and consultation so that parents and guardians, when they're going into space, to be able to have that discussion, it doesn't feel like it's just that discussion. It should be, we always say there shouldn't be any surprises that are really coming out of that. We should be working through and being able to understand that together and form that understanding.
I'm just like, because my brain is in that creative mode, I was like thinking of something physical or something, because I'm thinking about practicality of having to get different numbers for different team and services, and I was like, okay, some like, you know, some kind of simple package of like, you know, something that allows there to be storing of numbers or magnets or something that just adds to the, you know, tangibility of resources, and that can be had, and then they can always keep that to when they go to meetings, they can follow up with, you know, whatever they need, resources, pamphlets, just something that's, you know, I just imagine that in my mind, because I always like to put like magnets on my fridge, and this is the number to call when, right? So
No, I think too that there's my head goes two different places. So one is it's really hard to delineate what a start point to what you're suggesting is, because special education supports and services, mental health and well-being supports and services sit across everybody, some and few. So we have school leaders like Rima and Lisa leading what we refer to as universal design and accommodation as best practice. And then based on the individual student, their strengths and their programming needs, we move into those different spaces at different times and places. And so there isn't really a hard, today we were in this land and tomorrow we're in this land. And so that entry point might be in the initial conversations coming into kindergarten. The entry point might be in the initial conversations coming into district, but it also might be emergent at any point, K to 12 or 21. So that's a bit challenging. And then in terms of the numbers, the composition of our teams for each school change. So we don't have one psych, one social work, one speech, and one facilitator that are a 4 that travel to their schools. They jigsaw, and so that team looks different at each school. So quite often it is the special education resource teacher that will put that together for the school team, because they're landing it within the context locally in their community. Here's your administrators, here's your CERT team, here's who's in and out of classrooms, classroom support staff, and our inclusive student services team members are, and sharing that out, but usually designed from the school team out, because that's where that unique combination of individuals exists in that way. And what we've heard from parents and caregivers over time too is, I need the information I need, but please don't give me more, it's overwhelming. So when we come and go, do you know that we have like 17 different roles that can support your child? A parent goes, well, I'm either great, I want all of them, or wow, that's a lot of adults in my child's life. So we kind of try and introduce And then with a lot of our staff, on the professional responsibility around informed consent, it's really important that that relationship develop. And a lot of the teams, like social work, like speech, will do that conversational with parents and caregivers because it's giving a little bit of themselves in introduction to the family. So sometimes giving a thing replaces the conversation and relationship. And in a busy school, that can sometimes be a habit of practice and slide that might actually impact in the opposite of intended, because people go, well, you have the thing. Versus, can I help you? Are you on your phone? Can you take a picture? Here's my number, or I'll give you my board contact information, and having that, how much do you want from me and in what form do you want it? Because standardizing a package says one form of delivery too.
Right.
So just, yeah, our world tends to be, in the family's world mainly, tends to be a little complex in figuring out what the unique combination is for each child and family individually.
Okay, I'm just gonna follow. I understand that, and I think that's really good to kind of see it from that point of view. I think, like listening and rethinking it in my mind, I think that there's still room, based on what you said, to still personalize those pieces, and whether it's from those individual service providers, and they do that with, just so that there's, there's that piece of like personalized connection with that parent. I think that's still relevant because, I'm sure parents get a lot of information, whether they're in this program or that program, but some personal piece touch to it. That's kind of where I was going, not necessarily to have like because like you said, there's so many different departments that deal with different things, but that piece should be considered, just because again, there's different culture, different styles. That first initial connection makes a difference to that person, yes.
I want to spend more money with Connor. I don't know if we will make him more work for, but I think it would be great to bring the presentation there, but also for the certain principals to get the same experience we did and give potential actions and wonders back to us. I don't know who coordinates all that information. I don't know who sets all the implementation, but I'm with you, Connor.
Go ahead, Sonia. Yeah, just watching time. I guess, board, if, I like this idea of to do the, either write a letter, write a presentation, the 12th is right, in-person thing is always more impactful. Really, what are some of our timing to get something to you for this to make it valuable? Or do we have time to put something together? I guess is more my concern. Not that I don't want it, but just.
We can have the draft, like, we could do a draft and have it for our next meeting in November, right? Because that meeting's December 12th. So we still have a SEAC meeting before then. We can finalize the letter at that SEAC meeting and then send it on. And then when the 12th comes along, we go in there to have that with them, and then the discussion revolves around that, right?
Just thinking presentation wise, the two big word graphs, like the word clouds, I love those.
Yeah.
Those are visual and stunning, and it immediately pops, people will pick up different things and then maybe spark some ideas that way.
The advantage is we have Leslie's presentation report. So we can actually pull clips from Leslie presenting this evening,
Yes.
if Leslie's okay with that. And then, I think we also have a good placemat for collecting kind of thoughts and wonders. And we can work on that, open up a space for SEAC to say, what was your, like, is this are we reflecting accurately, collected draft? And then bring it back through SEAC.
And you can add quotes that actually came from the survey and hear family voice. I think that's key to personalize it. We're asking them to have better communication, more personal communication. So we've got to bring the stories forward. We've got to bring the sentiment forward, the actual parent voice forward, so that we move away from that professional piece. Oh, okay, this is what parents are saying. What are we gonna do about it? It's like, let's hear the heart of these families and what they're communicating in the survey. Some of those were educators.
Right, but
Yeah, same idea, but from what the parents wrote in the survey.
Yeah. Maybe something like that.
Okay, so just, yeah, we could do that, for sure. So, anybody I'm not sure how everybody feels. Anyone want to make a motion about writing a letter to the admin to be shared with the certs with respect to this?
Sorry,
Tara?
I'm writing letters.
Tara? Anyone want to second that motion?
I can second the motion.
Spencer, all in favor? Okay, motion is passed then. Okay, who's writing the letter? Sarah, just say she's
I like
writing the
writing
letter.
I can draft some.
We can, and if you wanna do it in the form of an impact update, we can do that too, or we.
Yeah, I think this is,
Yeah,
it's not
it's
really a letter, it's really.
Yeah, but or something that we're sharing across.
Yeah.
We can have.
And I do really like the idea of representative of SEAC at that, and the certs actually getting to know who we are, because I think that is huge, because we could be a large resource for them as well, right? Especially the different associations, right?
As a suggestion then, so we've scaffolded kind of the impact updates across the year. We had SEAC as either January, February, and CPP, the day treatments is December, we could just flip them. And actually use that tool that schools are like we're building the anticipation of receiving. So we could probably just flip them and move SEAC to do the December one, and then that be the release point to certs. We'll just have to circulate it maybe electronically, but that will pull up your comments, Charlene, about the codes. And it will be all pure parent caregiver codes, in that issue.
Okay. Excellent. All right, moving on then to, moving back to Jessica. Yes, Chris Leslie, thank you so much for all your help and your hard work with our survey. We really appreciate it. I think we got some great information out of it this time. Okay, then we're moving on to our open discussion period, which was with respect to SEAC, in the parent and caregiver engagement. No, I think that was survey results. I think this was discussing.
This was the plan of action.
Oh, okay, I took this as, you know, we had been talking about that, the event we were gonna have before COVID. That's what I took that as, but I could be wrong. I also think we're kind of stuck on time, so we may need to move it forward if everybody's okay. There's a lot of new faces at this table, but there's some here who would remember, right as the pandemic hit, we were neck deep in planning an advocacy night for parents. SEAC was going to run it and have breakout groups and do an event on, you know, sort of helping parents, you know, gain skills and effective advocacy, parents and children, right? And in particular, high school students as well, for how to effectively advocate for themselves within the school building. And of course, that came to an abrupt halt when everything shut down and, you know, we couldn't get into the schools or anything else. So we sort of shelved that. I'm thinking maybe, because there's a lot of discussion that would go along with that maybe we punt that discussion to our next meeting if everybody's okay, and maybe talk about unshelving that and looking at putting something together as a group, because I think it would serve to help a lot of parents well, as well as students, right? So, all in favor of punting it, or any question? Okay. We will put that, I guess, to our next meeting. SEAC consultation on the DDSB's accessibility procedure, which is sitting, like, I passed it around earlier today, so you guys should have it. And it's Lisa's conference is going to be directing this. Welcome, Lisa. Thank you for.
Good evening, everyone. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me on quite short notice, and very pleased to meet all of you virtually. And I'm bringing forward the procedure that you have a copy of, along with Michelle Crawford-Eade. Both Michelle and I are actually co-chairs of an accessibility working group within the DDSB. And we have the privilege of working with a number of colleagues across the system from various departments, as well as a representative from the Ability Center. So part of the work that we've been doing with the accessibility working group, we actually received an audit from the Ministry for Seniors and Accessibility early in 2022. And one of the outcomes from the audit, or one of the recommendations, was for us to take a look at the document that we have in relation to accessibility. We actually do have a policy that's titled accessible customer service and a regulation that goes along with that. But there was a recommendation for us to look at a document that was a little bit more in line with what the ministry actually recommends as a sample policy or procedure. We also had some great discussions around the incredible amount of work that went into our human rights, anti-discrimination, anti-racism policy, as well as the human rights inclusive design and accommodation procedure. There's an awful lot of detail covered in that. Despite having all of that in existence already, the ministry was really looking for us to have a standalone document, which really talked about the various standards within the AODA. And so therefore we put together what you have. It is still in draft form. We are going to be recommending it be a procedure and adopted under the human rights, anti-discrimination and anti-racism policy. It would cover students, employees, and community members, which is what is required under the AODA. But the document you have in front of you is still in draft. We would definitely welcome any questions, comments, any feedback from yourselves as a committee. And know that we're also partnering with our unions and federations for feedback, as well as throughout the working group that we work on regularly, both Michelle and I, with a goal to take this through to admin council at the end of the month and eventually to governance by the end of the year. So happy to take any feedback, questions, or comments this evening, but also appreciate you probably haven't had the document for too long. And also welcome to receive any feedback via email if that would be your preference as well. We have a little bit of time. Anything you wanted to add, Michelle?
No, we're good, Lisa. That was a great wrap up. Lots of work put into it. Thank you.
But I'm not sure what the will of SEAC is. Do you guys want time to review it and maybe provide email feedback with respect to this? Or just bearing in mind the time now, it's already 8 o'clock. Really packed agenda tonight. What would be your timeline for receiving feedback?
If possible, by midweek next week would be preferable. If we could say by Wednesday morning, if possible, if that's reasonable. I think that gives us just under a week. So we are getting feedback from a number of different sources, and we'd like to pull it together with the goal of bringing it to admin council for the end of the month.
Okay. Is there a way to provide the SEAC members with email to, in order to provide feedback?
Council send it to the session.
Oh, okay, all right, so we can all, if you guys have feedback.
Yeah.
I can send it to Michelle or Lisa directly, and I can go, okay.
Sounds good.
Okay.
Thank you very much. I appreciate your time this evening. Thank you very much for allowing me to join you.
Thank you. No, we really appreciate it. Thanks for the opportunity to take a look at this. Yeah, I think I'd like to have a little bit of time to sit with it and read it over in detail. You know.
No, that's great. The only thing I would just mention as well is that it really is, it does read as a lot of commitment statements. And that was purposeful because a lot of the detail and the operational pieces you actually find in our human rights policies and procedures already. So the goal wasn't to sort of mirror that and add it, but have this as adopted under it. So in some cases you may read it and you might say, well, it's a little bit light. But because there was so much work and consultation already done in a number of procedures and policies that are referred to, that was the purpose of keeping it more high level, if you will.
Okay. Good to know. Are there any questions before we move on with this, just as far as, you know, what we're looking for, anything else?
Do we have access to the links to these different policies that are there? Is that on the board website?
Actually, they're all in the, I think, we got a copy of this? We get a copy of this by
Second email.
the second
Second
email
email,
as a
okay.
copy, and the links are all in that copy. Okay? Excellent. Okay, thank you so much. I appreciate your time.
Thank you very much.
Okay. Okay, business arising from the minutes. A couple of things, and I'll pass it around. And the same thing, if you guys just want to give me feedback. I started, I don't know if you recall, but back in June, we talked about writing a letter to the ministry with respect to the promotion of trades before the completion of a high school diploma, as opposed to more sort of push towards the high skills majors and doing it through that sort of procedure, as opposed to saying, you know, just leave school and go on to a trade, right, early. I drafted a first draft. I'm gonna pass it around. If you guys wanna take a look at it, and you can provide me with your feedback, you know, through email or whatever for it, and we can bring it to the next meeting for finalization. Because I don't think there's a date we have to have it out by, but I just did a first stab at it, and I think it might be pretty rough, to be honest. And while that's going around, the second item is, so under the regulations, we are required to have 10 meetings a year. And our first meeting was canceled because we didn't have quorum, and we had a lot of presentations. We really couldn't, with the people that were coming, we couldn't have sort of proper dialogue with respect to, you know, the procedures and stuff. We need like feedback if you're having mainly trustees and a couple of SEAC reps here. So we canceled that meeting. So we're gonna have to reschedule that meeting in order to comply with the regulation. The question is, when? Do we reschedule it and have a meeting early July? We have early July. We've had one in July previously, the end of June, or do we double up in a month? Or how, some feedback on how you guys like to handle that 10th meeting. Meeting in July may give us time to, you know, provide comments on finalized budget. You know, that tends to come out later, but. Yeah, that's the thing, that's the problem, so, and then we did it. We had to cancel, when we had to cancel in 2020, the meeting in sort of January, March, we rescheduled it, but that was a little different.
And technically, budget has to be passed by July 1st. It was right, we had to, that year, for similar reasons, the trustees had to apply for an exception legislations, because the GSNs came late too. But I believe we had access past budget by July 1st. Okay, July's doable, it just depends on this committee's commitments too.
Yeah.
If you were posing the potential for parent engagement, parent caregiver engagement, as long as there's forum and action business, it counts as a meeting, we could come in an hour before that and have a brief meeting and then go into the night that you will probably be available.
That might be an opportunity to do that.
So just gonna take this to December 12th?
No, this is, if we put together a parent engagement night,
Oh, okay.
so come in, you know, an hour, half an hour before that, have a quick meeting. Then it's on the books, and then go into our engagement night. So maybe we plan to reschedule when we pick a date for that, if we pick a date for that. Think about that, yeah. Go ahead.
Other option, speaking very selfishly, maybe somewhere around the April, May timeframe with budgeting, with the budget coming out, may or may not come out, maybe somewhere around there if we need an extra time to do GSNs or technical cleaners or, you know, things like that.
Okay, those are options.
Well.
Why don't we take some time and chew on it a little bit and redirect, we're gonna come back to it again next meeting, but then, you know,
See where we land on the parent night.
see where we land, yeah, have our discussion about parent night, see where we land on that, and then kind of go from there. So we'll put that into our business arising from, right? For next month. Okay, moving on to number 12, SEAC gallery considerations. I'm saying considerations, but that's another piece of the legislation, right, that governs SEACs across the province, is that according to that legislation, it's a public meeting, so we're supposed to have an in-person public gallery. We've talked from the beginning, once COVID hit, this live streaming to YouTube is an accessibility thing that I think is fantastic to keep, which means we do have to be in this room, but we wanna keep that for parents that, because, you know, I mean, there's not a lot of views, but there's a lot more views of the actual SEAC meeting online than we've had in-person galleries previously. But to bring in an in-person gallery, we're looking at a small one. I think we might get 10 in here, you know, maximum, and have it pre-registered. For security purposes, as well as just knowing that whether our gallery is full or not, right? Because we won't have the space for you know, a big group of people in this room, right? So it kind of keeps the numbers, you know, being optimistic. I mean, 10 chairs may never get filled. It may never, right? But we've had upwards of, you know, 7 or 8 people in the past, you know. Yeah.
And easy courses.
Yeah. Yes, yeah, we do have, yeah. And there are courses that the teachers do take for, I know there's the one second course for second 2, I think, where they need to attend the SEAC meeting. So, we sort of just wanted to, you know, kind of put that out there to them that, you know, we kind of, I don't think it's even a motion because it's regulation, we have to kind of follow it, but just sort of have that discussion around it and talk about how comfortable people are with it.
I think my only thought is if we're doing pre-registers, that we have some way of tracking those who don't get in to know.
Yeah.
After our parent engagement night will be very popular.
Of course I will.
The room next door, the boardroom, does have live streaming as well. It's set up for a board. Just in some of our conversations, we felt that although that opens a potential for a larger gallery, having us spread out in terms of the type of conversations we have and in that larger space with the size of SEAC, not necessarily conducive to the work of SEAC, and the nature by which we get together.
Yeah, the boardroom's very big for us, I think. Like, this is a nice intimate setting where we can all have that easy conversation without microphones and stuff, right? So, anyway, so just, you know, looking at bringing that back for the November meeting. Does anybody have any questions or concerns with respect to that? Outside of, yes, keeping track of whether or not if we fill the gallery, how many people could get in?
That's right.
And giving them even maybe priorities at the following meeting if they weren't able to get in person at all.
Yeah, I'm speaking with my hospital hat on. Our infection control procedures at the hospital are ever changing, who's masking and where, and under what conditions can we meet, and is there anything equivalent in the school board setting? Would there ever be a directive as COVID numbers change about how large can a meeting be, or can we invite the public in?
Yeah, so I think if I can answer your question and situate it under a larger health and safety umbrella, we take our direction from the Durham Health Department. So there have been times where they have guided masking, not masking, and we follow that, so we would keep in touch with that. I think the other component under safety and well-being is that SEAC is a committee, is the one kind of documented committee of the board, and by such, we will be applying the same code of conducts and safety measures in terms of that. I think just some of the conversation around the table, although most individuals who would access the gallery would do so with an investment in the work, similar to most people accessing the gallery for board or standing do so with an investment in the work. But we do talk about services for students, and we do talk about identity, and so we would be mirroring similar procedures. So if there was anything from a safety perspective or a health well-being perspective, we would be keeping in sync with procedures for the board and following, as I said, from the health department in terms of physical health protection risks.
Any other questions? You know, and I'll just add, when we've had in-person galleries before, it actually is an actually great way sometimes for us to communicate and connect with some parents who may come out in a positive way, right? And give them a touch point. So, you know, some great conversations have happened sort of, you know, pre-COVID, before and after those meetings, in that way, which has always been kind of nice, so. Okay, moving on then, to the association reports. There was a report circulated by Kathy previous to her stepping down. There was a voice conference on October 13th, 2023. The information was circulated, but it sounds like they had a 2-day conference and it looks like it was pretty packed. And out of that, there was a voice sponsorship prospectus for 23-24. If you guys want, if anybody wanted to share that with their associations or anything they thought that would be helpful for. Okay. Any questions with that or any other association reports that weren't sent to us?
Is this where I do the PIC and or the Autism Ontario?
Yes. Oh, yes.
So the Autism Ontario one is easy, but I believe we got a letter for an alternate. This will be the first time.
Oh, that's a correspondence. That's a correspondence. But yes.
Okay, we'll get back to that one.
Yeah, because that is an action item. We have to deal with that, so.
So I have been the representative on the Parent Engagement Committee as the SEAC representative for the last 2 years. It's a great committee. Last night was their meeting, so they tend to meet the Wednesday evening before SEAC. I believe it's 5 or 6 meetings for the year, so it's not 10 like hours. They're all virtual meetings so that you can log on from your home. The parents are very much involved. Each year they have subcommittees, right? One does the presentation, the speakers talk, one does the newsletter, another one does the grant opportunity. I think I'm missing 2 other subcommittees. And I didn't pick a subcommittee yet this year because as I'm coming to the end of 2 years, I'd like to offer the opportunity for another SEAC member to get the opportunity to engage with parents on the Parent Engagement Committee. Anybody want to know more about the Parent Engagement Committee? We have someone who's done it already.
As an actual PIC member, though, like not a CF rep on PIC, but you were part of PIC?
It's a great experience.
That's correct. I believe we changed the name. So if there's no takers, I will continue to be the representative for SEAC, but next year this time, I will be looking to move away from that position.
Fair enough. Thank you.
While I'm on the topic, is there a committee that SEAC would like me to take? We always did the speakers so that we can see how we fit in.
I think that's an excellent one to be a part of, to be honest. I think it's probably the more appropriate for a CF voice on, especially you know, when they're choosing them, but because I would think that the grant thing is not in the same, we wouldn't impact it.
Yeah. It's amazing, they did the introductions and they're like, my kid's in grade 2, my kid's in grade 6. And I'm like, my kid's aged out of school about 10 years ago.
That's where you just leave that. All right, are there any other committee, association reports or community reports? No? Okay, then we're moving on to tab C, which are correspondence, number 14. Starting off with the Autism Ontario letter, naming a alternate, thank you. Naming an alternate, Maritza Bezarin.
I don't know her name. No, sorry. I'm just excited to have her.
That's our we. A letter is indicating that she meets all the eligibility criteria. We would just need to make a motion to request that board approve Maritza Bezarin as the alternate representative for Autism Ontario. Anybody want to make a motion? Senator Renee, seconders? Tara, all in favor? Okay, if you guys could bring that before board at your next meeting.
We have it on the report tracker for special board on October 6th, if it was to pass here.
November.
That's it.
Okay.
Sorry. Yes,
Okay.
We just kind of keep track of where things might come, and that was the next business agenda following this meeting, so we tentatively put it there. Lisa will confirm that with Kathy tomorrow.
And our next three letters that we received from Simcoe County, Thames Valley, Waterloo Region, all relate to the special district portion funding, which we have written copious letters about year after year after year. I don't think we're even getting responses to anymore, but
We have not heard update on what the formula will be yet.
okay. So I think we should probably wait till we hear an update on what the formula will be, before we even try to respond or, reply, back up any of these letters, because dare to dream. Dare to dream, probably not, but anyway, yeah. So does anybody have any questions with respect to or comments with respect to the correspondence? Okay, moving on then to community concerns. So there's a few of us who received an email from a parent with respect to her child who has been diagnosed with cortical vision impairment. I'm not sure if she managed to reach out to you or not, because I sent along your email address to her. That's apparently the main identification, along with some other exceptionalities. She has been seeking one-on-one support from an itinerant vision resource teacher who is trained in CVI. She states that she has letters from doctors stating the need and backing it up with evidence of the importance of a TBI support, as well as confirmation of that from W. Ross Macdonald School for the Blind. We're apparently willing to present to SEAC, but I'm not sure how that would help us with this. Wants to know, basically she wants to know how the decisions are made around who gets support and who does not, and how the, what types of supports are hired. Michelle, and we're handing that one to you.
Through you, Chair. So
Yeah.
the DDSB supports students who are blind and low vision through wraparound support. So it really starts with the classroom teacher, the special education resource teacher, our instructional facilitators assigned to the school. There's audiologists, there's transcribers, there's education support staff when appropriate, and of course, there's teachers of the blind low vision, which are itinerant teachers with our board. So support for students are met through a variety of supports, including indirect support, which would be to building capacity with the classroom teacher, with the special education staff, consulting with school-based staff, as well as with the provincial school, like you mentioned, W. Ross Macdonald, and through teaching and learning. Direct support for students typically means withdrawal support with teachers of the blind low vision to teach either students pre-Braille or Braille to proficiency in Braille. And that is for the purpose of accessibility to curriculum, as they are the only ones within our system that actually have that skill. This year, we have shifted staffing to include 5 teachers of the blind, low vision, including 2 experienced special education resource teachers that are being mentored and trained by the current more veteran teachers that are on the team. We are also supporting training for our new members, which include assisting them not only through the mentorship, but also to take Braille 1 and Braille 2, which is what they need to take in order to actually take the additional qualification for blind, low vision. And we are actually supporting them through a reimbursement after they have completed the course. We've also expanded recruitment to support current special education resource teachers wishing to take Braille 1 and 2 in order to take the additional qualification course. The additional qualification course has not been offered since 2020, according to Western's website, which is the one that typically offers the AQ. They're offering it in 2024, January, and we are also looking at the potential as a board to offer it. So this is how we are building capacity within our blind, low vision teachers and within the school, and how we're supporting students. And moving forward, we're hoping to grow with our support, but that is currently how we support students that have blind, low vision without getting into too many specifics.
I definitely recommend the parent reach out to Ontario parents of visually impaired children so that they can have the advocacy support, find out what other resources are available to them, find out if they're connected to CNIB, see if they're connected to other resources that know the age of the child. But I think, you know, it's a common issue because there are fewer and fewer educators who are trained. And even when you take Braille 1 and 2, you know, they've found, you know, research has showed that as a sighted person taking Braille, it doesn't work. Even a child who is vision impaired, such as my daughter, she has too much vision to actually learn Braille, so it was never effective for her. So, you know, even with, I'm happy to hear that all of those pieces are being put in place and that reimbursements are given to teachers to try to entice them into those spaces of learning. But it's going to be an uphill battle, and so that parents, the struggle that they're facing is real, and maybe that's what they need to hear, that the challenges that you're facing is real, and what you shared would be great information for them to understand how the system works, because they're probably hearing, oh, well, my child has this and my child has that, and as from you know, other stakeholders or other people that families are just probably connecting with, but it'll look different in a space and depending on what the vision impairment is for the child and how that plays out for them day to day. So I think a good first step would be to share OPVXC's info and yeah, okay.
Thank you very much.
Appreciate it. Go ahead.
Yeah, the parent actually reached out to me too, because I think Ava, you gave her my email address at one point.
Oh, okay.
So I know that she is aware of OPVIC and reaching out or involved in some kind of way. I guess it was like my understanding that based on the child's diagnosis of cortical visual impairment, they wouldn't qualify for the support of the specialized ed one-to-one teacher based on the Durham District School Board, and I think that's where she's having some difficulty understanding and trying to navigate the supports that are available for her child, because based on, so what she explained to me was that the years before schooling, she was accessing a community support for assistance with her child, and their progress during that time is like crazy different compared to since they got into school and their improvement on the scale. I'm not totally familiar with the scales that they use and everything for their diagnosis, but I think her frustration is coming from the fact that she was seeing those improvements in her child, and since coming to school, the community support is telling her now the school board is supposed to be providing these supports, and she's not seeing the supports, so the child's not seeing the improvements that they were before entering school.
So I don't know, like, I guess one question I know she has, and maybe I'm not sure if people have an answer today, but she doesn't, she's kind of wondering why or how the board is determining which diagnoses are being supported by these teachers and which ones aren't. So she could further.
So I can answer through you, Chair, I can answer generally, with the respect to the privacy of the student, obviously. That it's really based on an assessment, so a functional vision assessment, a few other assessments that actually do occur as well. We also take a look at what the recommendations are. Many of the recommendations are to be implemented within the classroom at the person that is closest to the student, that is being the teacher or the educational assistant that sometimes is in the room, or the CERT that is also supporting the teacher. And then we really go based upon where the skill set of the student is and where we can close some of the gaps in terms of accessibility to curriculum. So currently right now, I have 3 staff members that are proficient in Braille. So they are focusing upon students that need to learn Braille. In regards to other students, depending upon where their assessment is at, it's the supports that I sort of outlined. And it's really more on an indirect basis through the classroom teacher and or through mobility services that we do have, is to really assist the school in terms of implementing and assisting with accessibility. So for example, one of the examples would be putting tape around the door, for example. Another would be enlarging the print. Another would be using blacklighting, for example. So those are things that direct support is not what is needed. It's what is needed within the classroom, just like any other accommodation to support the student. Does that answer you?
Censor Matthew, you're gonna say something?
I do, but I'm not sure if I should just ask Michelle after the meeting.
Okay.
It's up to you, okay?
Yeah, I'll ask that last one.
Okay. Are there any other questions or comments with that, respect to that particular issue? Okay. When Rowan sent his regrets today, he did send along a community concern. Sort of 2 questions. One of the community members, parents, had approached the LDAR chapter. They are a teacher in another district and have a child struggling with reading. The parent whose child is a student with the DDSB has learned a lot about Empower from her work, her district work, and wanted to inquire the following. Is Empower currently being used as a trial program at any school in the DDSB, and if so, which ones? And when are the plans to trial Empower? When are there plans to trial Empower at the DDSB, that she cannot find it anywhere? That was question number 1. And as of now, what has the ministry provided as guidelines on how to align current teaching methods with structured literacy? Do we have any timelines yet?
Great, so I think we'll do a party tonight and then we'll bring back information both between Inclusive Student Services and our teaching and learning team. I think lots of individuals are leaning into the Ontario Human Rights Commission's Right to Read report and how that is very thorough in its recommendations in terms of literacy instruction. Our school teams, our district teams have the new language curriculum, which is quite thorough and rich in responding to the right to read. We talk about kind of Lisa Drake, our lead for speech, and co-lead with teaching and learning on the project. We'll often talk about the 5 legs of a strong table for literacy programs and how that curriculum is putting that in place. So as a district, we're really focusing on classroom practice and the strategies in class that align with the ministry. The ministry's put out some directions in terms of phonics, phonemic awareness, which are kind of strand B of that literacy curriculum, but how they fall within the other areas as well. Empower is a program that we've looked at a few times as a district. So it comes from the Hospital for Sick Children as the lead team and the research team attached to Empower. The model itself is really directive in terms of needing quite a high amount of daily teacher time with a small group. And then there's a lot of conditions on the group, such as when you launch the year with a group, you're not allowed to change the group. So if you have a student move out, you're not allowed to add another student in. So there's a lot of fidelity constraints on the flexibility of that within a school as a tool. We have attended and had SIC kids come in and do presentations probably about every year or every other year, looking for a few changes in the program. It's largely worksheet driven in terms of the teacher bringing that to life, but binder based. And so as a district, when we look at Empower, and I recognize that a lot of boards have moved forward with Empower, generally they're boards that are not as resourced in terms of having the breadth of the speech language team that the Durham District School Board has, and more of the larger boards. They tend to be some of the smaller boards, as well as Toronto, located in proximity to SIC kids. So it does require withdrawal. It would change you need to add either a teacher in or you need to pull the teacher out. So that impacts the cert role. So where we went forward with a pilot, again, not wanting to dismiss our responsibility to the students that need to be sought and who are not yet quite at reading level in terms of those markers of the curriculum and developmentally. So we went forward with a trial of Lexia, which is a software program also aimed specifically for students with learning disabilities, but beneficial to all, and have been piloting that. But as we move through that, we've really turned our focus back to what is the whole instruction in the classroom. And through our literacy focus, we are one of the few, I think the only board provincially that has said, with literacy being grounded in good language practices, team coaching requires both an educator and a speech language path. So we actually have 9 additional speech paths for this school year that are partnering with a curriculum coach, and they're going into schools together on the foundations of literacy instruction to actually change the experience in the classroom in terms of what kids are experiencing and come alongside educators so that we're not opening the gap in the first place. And one of those teams is focusing on intermediate grades 7, 8, 9, 10, because we do know we have students that are moving from elementary to secondary who are not proficient readers. And we have made the statement, I think in most of our materials going out to schools, that reading is a human right because of the access that it gives. We've also applied separately. We're just in process of talking with a researcher because of the grounding of literacy in oral language. One of our considerations was what happens for our students who are deaf, hard of hearing, for whom oral language is not part of how they access communication and relationship, because the curriculum itself, the right to read, recommendations, and then how that's brought into a classroom, and most of the research around literacy is based on hearing and oral communicators. And so we did apply for, and with thanks to the ministry for approving, we did get a research kind of project grant to look at what are best practices for students who are deaf, hard of hearing in terms of literacy. And so we're almost finalized with a researcher, extensive education experience, and who identifies as a member of the deaf community. To your point, Sharon, anytime we go into either low vision or blind or deaf, hard of hearing, we really need lived experience impacting the work and driving the work. And so we're taking a look at that. So I know the question centered on Empower, but I really think it looks at, so what are you doing for the students who are not yet, or students of concern in terms of the adult change of practice to help the kids. We're looking at a number of things, but at this time, we did have a couple schools try Empower. It is not a train the trainer model. The trainers are at SIC Kids, and any teacher or educator engaged in Empower must be trained by the SIC Kids team. And so there can't be any practice spread within a school either. If a teacher is trained and the teacher leaves the school, Empower leaves the school with the teacher. And so when we look at a system of, as I shared earlier tonight, 80,000 students, 15,000 on service through inclusive student services, about just over 12,000 on individual education plans, one of the largest groups being those with learning disabilities. Having a model of intervention that sits on a person's training with a trainer in a group that's not malleable. And we also know that strategies in a classroom one year must be delivered in the classroom the next year, otherwise there's not generalization. And some of our concerns, again, the program has had great efficacy in some of the districts that have put that heavy withdrawal model in place and the consumption of time that it requires. It'll be interesting how that sits with the new literacy curriculum requirements. But for us, because we can't kind of create that pathway where you're kind of smoothing that withdrawal over a number of years with consistency at the number of sites we have, we've turned our attention to changing the classroom environment for literacy instruction in itself, with a commitment to all classrooms in the district. So literacy plan and math plan both going before board, we will bring both of them here and taking a look at that. But as a tool right now, I think we might have one school that continued, but even the school that had bought in and was quite excited about the model when we said, and so what happens next year? They had a really hard time answering that question. And so we have not gone forward with Empower as a board, always open to reevaluating resources, always open to new, but the tightness on the parameters of fidelity were perceived in our district to be barriers for implementation.
Does anybody have any questions? Comment? No? Okay, thank you. Is there any other community concerns that anybody else has to bring forward today? All right, moving on to celebrations and successes. Anybody have any celebrations or successes? No, still early. No, I'm sorry tonight, sorry.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I disappointed everyone. I'll figure something out. One day Adam gets to come.
Okay, yeah, exactly. Tell us a whole story.
Awesome.
Yeah, personal one. So both of my children have vision impairment. They have retinitis pigmentosa. They were born with it. My son is just turned 20. My daughter just turned 24. And my son and daughter were the first to receive the gene therapy that was approved about a year ago now, but it took almost a year to get it funded by OHIP in order to be able to access it, as it is $1 million surgery per eye. And so they were the first to receive it in March, and it was highly, highly successful. It's absolutely big for us. And so they both have pretty big social media platforms, and so they were using that platform for the advocacy. So a lot of their work went towards, they did a lot of conferences and public speaking and speaking at events to get the surgery approved, not just for them, but for, many other people in Ontario. So they were very excited about that.
That's huge, that's great news. Congratulations. That's awesome.
I'm impressed with the advocacy part.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah, because that's huge to get them for surgery that size, that cost.
It's amazing.
That quickly after approval to get the funding, so that's good news. That's incredible.
Thank you.
Any other celebrations or successes? Next SEAC meeting is November 9th, 2023, right here. Key topic is going to be DDSB website overview and feedback. So maybe take a look at the website and see what you have to say about that. Motion for adjournment. Sarah? Second, all in favor?